Well, everyone, welcome to tonight's council meeting for Monday, the 10th of December 2018. If we could all stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement, please. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. CM2 recording and webcasting of meetings. Council meetings being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting, that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made available for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations received by the Chair. I have been made aware of one from Councillor Glacken, non-pecuniary, less than significant, brief description is works for party noted in confidential report, family member works for party noted in confidential report, council meeting, CM 17.1 confidential report, today's date, action is to stay in room and vote. Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Mr Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979-147, requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of Section 79C1 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375 requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of the Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contributions plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Zachnich. CM4. Apologies, we have no apologies. We have no Merrill minute. CM5. CM6, the action plans, I'm happy to accept as a block. CM 6.1 to 6.4. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. 1. Actions complete for noting only. 2. Actions awaiting response from external parties. 3. Actions in progress. And 4. Long-term issues more than 3 months.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, I just have a question from a councillor. Did you wish to open debate?
No, I'll hear the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Con, question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is through you to the relevant member of staff, please. The report regarding increasing protections for hollow-bearing trees was previously indicated that it would be ready by the end of this calendar year. It's now indicated that it will be presented in February. I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that delay.
Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we're currently just trying to finalise the comments and the information that's at hand. Particularly with regards to the impacts and the changes the biodiversity legislation that's occurred across New South Wales. So we just want to make sure we're able to provide council with accurate information and the most up-to-date. Unfortunately, we won't be able to make next Monday night's cut-off.
Couple with that?
Got a follow-up question?
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr Keys. I just have a follow-up question regarding the current review of the Part 10 of the DCP. Will we now receive that hollow-bearing tree report with enough time to take into account any of its recommendations in the DCP review?
Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, certainly. The intention is that early February this first initial report on hollow-bearing trees will be provided, and that information will go towards part of the discussion and further review of the Albury Development Control Plan provisions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr Keys. Councillor Stutchbury, did you wish to open debate?
No debate, but I eagerly await the outcome of the draft Flying Fox Colony Management Plan to be presented next week. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Confirmation minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday the 26th of November. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday the 26th of November 2018 at 6:11 be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, did you just speak to that at all?
Thank you.
There have been no questions or debate. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no reports from community forums. There are a notice of motion. Councillor Thurley. Did you wish to move it, Councillor Thurley?
Yes, I should. I move that council staff undertake a review of the processing of development applications since March 2018, following amendments to the delegations of authority, and prepare a report for council. The report should include, but not be limited to, the type and number of applications referred to council and determined in this time, consideration of processing times, additional workload demand, and recommendation for improvements or modifications to the present delegations.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that? Thanks.
Just briefly, it was in February that we first moved to change the delegations of authority, and then again in March an additional motion made further changes to the planning delegations. I believe that some 8 to 9 months on, we've achieved some things that we hoped to achieve, but I think in other respects we've gone too far. And so I would like to re-examine where we've come from and what's happened in the interim, and get another report from council to settle on what is the best option. I believe that our intentions in February and March were good intentions. That is, that councillors should have a bigger say, more say in development applications in this city. I just happen to think that we got it a bit wrong, and we can fine-tune this and still achieve what was the intention at the time, that is to give councillors a better say in planning decisions, and but we can still streamline the process and not have insignificant and minor applications come to council. So I commend the motion.
Thank you. There are no speakers against. I have a speaker for. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very happy to second this motion. I said in my comments at the time earlier in the year when we made the original changes that I was prepared to entertain the changes for a period of about 6 months and support those councillors, particularly the new councillors, new being in this term, new to this term, who wanted to try an alternative arrangement, a way of doing things. I think we've certainly had at least 6 months, if not longer now, to get a good taste of how it operates under this regime. Like Councillor Thurley, I'm in favour of some change back, as it were, a little bit of rollback, and let's get a good report so we can thoroughly ventilate all positions and come up with the best solution.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. There's no further speakers for. I'd just like to say, from my own experience, for many years in another occupation where they took the capacity of attending court away and went into a mention system where members weren't able to provide evidence anymore, so they forgot how to give evidence. I think this process has been quite interesting for a lot of the new councils and the existing councils to understand what the development applications are, how they're dealt with, and certainly there's been some moments during the process where I see a distinct advantage, and I know it's been a little bit onerous with extra work for the staff, but it has been useful for myself, and I expect other councillors to understand the machinations of development applications. But I might further add, I think the planning team have worked really hard to reduce the turnaround on our DAs in the last 3 months, and it's a credit to the staff. And Mr. Keys, you can pass that on to the staff. And I look forward to the results of this report. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Presentations and deputations. We have CM 10.1, a presentation by the AlburyCity Youth Council, Mayor Campbell Westmoreland. Campbell, please find your way to the mic. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Probably helps if it's on. There we go. Too easy. All right. Hello, I'm Campbell. So I'm the AlburyCity Youth Council's Deputy Mayor. I'm stepping in for Oliver tonight, who couldn't make it. So this is just a recap of AlburyCity Youth Council's 2018, all the projects we've undergone. So the photo on the screen now is our current council. So these are the major projects throughout the year that we've undertaken. So they fall mainly under volunteering and consultation projects and projects that we actually run from within council with Mandy Wilson's assistance. So some of our major ones are winter solstice, the youth strategy feedback and consultation, so working with Mandy and the team, providing feedback and consultation on the youth strategy, working on the skate park strategy, the Murray River waterfront management strategy, Clean Up Graffiti Day, which is an initiative that we've engaged in for more years than I've been on youth council now. Clean Up Graffiti, crime, the Crime Prevention Committee, which is a committee that obviously sits within council. We have members attend representing the youth. White Balloon Day, Girls Stand Strong retreat, so we sent, was it 3 members? Yeah, so 3 members off to that. I'm not too informed on that, but from what I remember, they found it quite a positive experience. The Albury Tertiary Day, so looking at people around my age looking at heading off for tertiary study. We had a stall there promoting youth council and council. And then the actual projects we undertook, so we'll cover each of these a bit later, but the All Ability Disco, the Junior Disco, Gindamana Sports Day, Cool Schools, Youth Connect Card, Reflect and Respect campaign, and just general youth leadership. So as far as Mayor and Deputy reports concerned, this year we've seen far more inclusion with Youth Council into council, so we've been a lot more involved in consultation processes, which has been something I've found really positive. Council's always been supportive of young people being active, but this year especially, so it's been really positive. So our first, one of our major projects for the year was the All Abilities Disco, so fundraising money for Nathan Pearce to attend the Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi. So on the night it was a disco for people that in our community that might not always be able to attend traditional discos, I guess you could say, or would feel uncomfortable doing so. So we had a free sausage sizzle and a photo booth there on the night, and on entry fees alone we raised over $700, which was great. So we also had the junior disco. So the thing about the junior disco is we get primary school age children to come along to our youth council meetings. So we had representatives from 5 primary schools, and they drove most of the planning of the disco, and there was over 300 children on the night that attended, ages ranging from 6 to 12. And it was good just to get that connection with young people, well, younger than us, so that primary school age bracket, and just forming those connections. So when they're looking at getting into high school, about the time that they'd be looking to join youth council, they've got that experience and link with us. So that was us with some of the kids there, just some certificates we gave them. So the Gindmana Sports Project. So it's funded by AlburyCity and Family Community Services. So it's obviously the annual event. It focuses on young people that have fewer opportunities to engage in mainstream activities. I find it particularly rewarding personally. I live just across the road from where it's run, so it's good to see a lot of kids that I recognise from around the area engaging in sport and keeping out of trouble, I guess, because, yeah, obviously certain areas of Albury it is easier to... there aren't as many opportunities to engage in things like sports carnivals and stuff like that, so it's really great to see AlburyCity leading the charge on this. So the following services assist with the event, so Aboriginal Health Services, Albury Police, the Hub Youth Services, Argyle Housing, the NRL, Albury Lions Club and the West Albury Community Centre. So yeah, that's just some photos of the day. So cool, and now on to Cool Schools. So 6 secondary schools participated in Cool Schools this year. So it was young people participating in the program, so they travelled down to Melbourne to record an original track at Studio 52. So it allowed them to gain an insight into the music industry, which coming from a regional area can sometimes be difficult. A lot of these guys, though, were self-recording as well, so this was just a chance to get them a bit of professional experience. And then we also hosted the Cool Schools Award Night, which allowed them to perform their tracks. And all of the tracks that were recorded went onto the Cool School CD, which we have over there. And I've been told that you'll all be going home with a copy of. So if you've got teenagers or just after some easy listening, might be a good idea. So yeah, there was 7 nominations as well. So this is part of a competition with other schools, with other areas, and there were 7 nominations for the coolest school, and 3 awards were won on the night. And I think, did we get coolest school as well? Yeah. So they hold the awards night down in Melbourne. So these were just some of the guys that recorded. And the Youth Connect card, so partnership with Wodonga City Council, which connects young people to local services. So the Youth Council liaised with local businesses to gain support. Over 9,000 cards were created and distributed, and the launch for the card was held at the Retro Cafe this year. So I think every year it alternates between us and Wodonga hosting the launch. Clean Up Graffiti Day. So the Youth Council cleaned up 3 locations, 1 in Lavington and 2 in Central Albury. And as part of this, AlburyCity Youth Council received a $750 grant, which will go towards the Townsend Street Art Project. The Respect and Reflect campaign. So this is a cross-border initiative, and the AlburyCity Youth Council and Retro Youth Management Committee are working on it. So developing a campaign for local youth that's about respect and equality. So the campaign's looking at targeting people aged between 13 to 18 and looking to shift attitudes and beliefs and behaviours. So respectful relationships, that it's all in that kind of vein. So through this process, they've identified the 5 top issues. So consent, pack mentality, peer pressure, cyberbullying and emotional manipulation. So that's an ongoing project, and obviously a lot more will be coming out of that. And yeah, that's us done.
And then you went to sleep, mate.
Sorry.
Excellent. Thanks, Campbell. Questions? Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
I'm intrigued by the Townsend Art Project. Can you just fill me on what that's all about?
Yeah, do you want to jump up?
So where Hog's Breath is, you know, as you lead down into Kmart. So the owner of the business has allowed us to paint directly onto the walls. So we did have some artwork placed up there. There was a lot of tagging going on in that particular area, and there was a lot of we had a lot of complaints around feeling uncomfortable and safe walking down that to the Kmart. To Kmart. So basically, we put in a grant, and we got a grant through Clean Up Australia for $750. But I think council's going to contribute a little bit to that through the public art officer. She's going to be doing. So there's going to be a mural placed on the wall of. I think it's a bike project. So I think it used to be a bike shop many years ago. So they're going to go back in time and sort of create this artwork that it's going to look amazing. It's going to have all these bikes and going down there. So it'll be a lot more. Yeah. Yeah, it won't be tagged and, yep.
Thank you.
No worries.
Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. A follow-up question, if I may, and then I've got another couple of other questions. So, Mandy, are you saying, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, are you saying it's the laneway? Okay, thank you very much. My first question is the All Ability Disco Campbell. How many participants did you have at that, and where was that one held?
So it was held at the what's the hall name again? Mirrambina, that's it. Okay. Yeah, so the Mirrambina Community Hall, and I think we had about 100 people there on the night, and they aged anywhere from about 10 to late 20s. Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you very much. And my next question is, I'm aware that there's a Christmas gig happening the night before Carols in QE2. What involvement have the Youth Council had with that? And how are the numbers looking? How's the communication been going to get the information out there? Because I'm very conscious of the fact that we've got to make sure it works. Otherwise, it's so that we encourage people to come next year if we can get another gig.
So that's being run mainly through the Retro Youth Management Committee, but as far as the AlburyCity Youth Council, we're involved with packing up and setting up, but as far as the promotion going, it'll be through the Retro Youth fan page, which is a Facebook page, and I think that has about 1,000 likes on Facebook. That's the main form of social media presence as far as communication goes, and that's been proved to be quite effective in the past. And as far as I know, with the headliners concerned, I'll
just say a bit about that. Yeah. So with that 22nd gig, I think they've got a lot of likes on there, so I think they'll get a fair crowd to that event. Good. And also, I think they just did some radio. Yeah. So and I don't. They generally get big following because of the bands that they get are obviously local, and then they've got Baker's Eddie, which is another popular band. But I think the idea of having a youth event is really amazing because they do get their opportunity to showcase all the talents that we do have in Albury, and the local bands have all their support networks. So we've got, and they come from all diverse schools. So all different schools. Obviously, you've got Xavier with Elk, and then you've got Albury High with Lauren Eddy and Tully and all those sort of people. So there's such a diverse. So they won't have a problem. But Youth Council will help with just the planning and setting up and promotion. But the Retro Youth Management Committee are the music gurus, basically.
Okay. All right, that's fantastic.
Sorry, I will just add as well, because it's being held on the 22nd. Obviously, there's not a lot going around. A lot of people stuck at home, so it's a good opportunity for a lot of young people to get out of the house, which, a lot of young people can feel like they're a bit held up around Christmas time. So, I think we will be expecting a pretty decent turnout.
Doing jobs.
Yep.
Oh, all right, and can I just double check, have you touched base, either of you, with the Border Mail? They just happened to be here tonight, and maybe they could do some sort of an article on it. Yeah,
we should follow that up.
All right.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow that up.
Okay.
Just going back to that, the wall in Townsend Street. So that's owned by a person. So that's Domino's Pizza.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the wall that's leading down there. So the owner that owns the building has agreed that we can paint directly on. Before, the artwork that we place on it was just on panels.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Campbell. That completes all the questions from the councillors. Thanks for your support and the team from the Youth Council. And yeah, no doubt you'll be moving on, mate, to greener pastures now. What's your highlight for your tenure on Youth Council, mate?
Oh, it's got to be working with Mandy. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Good answer, mate. And the pizzas, mate.
Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.
And the cover was done by a girl from community college.
Mandy Wilson, and this is the Cool Schools CD that was recorded, and the cover was done to the moon and back by a young lady at the artwork by Ricky Gagliardi from the community college. Well done. Thanks, Mandy, and thanks, Campbell, for your time tonight, mate. So we'll move on to reports from the minutes of committees and working parties. Minutes of the Audit and Risk and Improvement Committee. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive, note and accept the minutes recommendations of the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on Wednesday, the 21st of November 2018.
Thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
I would like to make one brief comment in that the chairman of the committee noted in a report that governance and best practice do not come cheap, nor is it easy to achieve, and Albury City has some way to go. As a result of that statement, a motion was put that council should be spending a lot more money on audit. The motion was defeated because in comparison to many other councils in New South Wales, we fall right in the median for money spent on audit and risk. And this council has achieved outstanding results in the respect of audit and risk. So we felt, the people who voted against that motion felt that we had achieved significant high quality audit and outcomes, and the expenditure of any more money without some justification could not be justified, and so that motion was defeated. It is, generally speaking, the Audit Committee's view that this council has a strong, vigorous, rigorous Audit Committee and has had for many, many years. In fact, AlburyCity has had an Audit Committee for longer than many, many other councils, and we had a committee before it was required by New South Wales Government. And we believe that the committee is functioning well and achieving good results.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There are no further speakers for or against, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. The minutes of the Local Traffic Safety Committee meeting. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council receives, note and accept the minutes recommendations of the Local Traffic Committee meeting held on Thursday, 22 November 2018.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Second that.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, did you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, I'd like to thank the members of the committee for their consultation and collaboration throughout the this year, and I'd like to congratulate Councillor Suchbury for his recommendation moving on to the committee and his appointment as the Deputy Chair. I think the highlight for this year, apart from a number of solid recommendations and subsequent approvals by Council, was the intersection modifications at Olive and Guinea. I drove through it a couple of times recently, and I think it's come out as a very, very good and safe result. So all staff should be congratulated. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey, and I'll reiterate that. I think it's a fantastic job, and well done to Brad, and pass that on to the staff. Thank you, Brad. Councillor Vanderman, you have a question?
Yes, Mr Mayor, through you to Councillor Doxey and perhaps Mr Ferris. It's still a continuing frustration for me to drive around the city at various times of day and night to have inordinate waits at traffic lights, and I really would like to see the Traffic Committee focus on getting those traffic signals to a more equitable cycle. So I'm asking Councillor Doxey if he would take that on board as a project for 2019.
Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Van der Ven for the question. I think you'll find that it's currently under review at the moment, as all our intersections across the city are. So, but thank you for your interest and your question.
Okay. Councillor King, you have a question?
Yes, I do have a question, probably to Councillor Stutchbury, who's in his new role. Councillor Stutchbury, you raised the arrows pointing left and right on the on-ramp of the southbound lane of the Hume Freeway. Now that you've got yourself a job there, how's that progressing?
Councillor Stutchbury.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you, Councillor King, for the question. Look, the RMS chap showed up to the meeting in person, if not in authority. And I quizzed him on a number of important topics, one of which was the southbound on-ramp from the freeway onto Barella Road, which I think is a matter of some urgency. Only last week I moved onto that from the freeway, and there was stationary traffic very close to the left lane of the freeway, so at least 110 kilometres an hour difference in speeds between those vehicles. And he said, he gave me the same answer to every question I asked him. He's going to take it back to his superiors in Wagga Wagga, which is up there on the border between Victoria and New South Wales. I quizzed him on the speed limit outside the Etamoga Rise housing estate. I was staggered to hear that RMS think that 100 km/h speed limit is absolutely fine outside that estate. And yet they also believe that reducing the speed limit to 80 a little bit further along outside the overall forge and Norski Scoob paper mill is also a good idea, so go figure. If this guy sticks onto the committee for a while, he's going to have to start coming back with a few answers, otherwise he's not going to enjoy himself. So, no progress yet, but I feel very confident for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Follow up, Councillor King.
Yeah, just another follow-up. I've raised a number of times about the gateways into Albury, particularly the entrance from Wodonga on the freeway, covered with weeds, rodents, paper, fire hazard. Has that been... sorry, Councillor Stutchbury, finished? Yeah, look... I know it's not under the bailiwick of Albury City Council, but when you come to someone's house and their front lawn is overgrown with weeds and their door is half hanging off, it doesn't present a good picture of what's potentially behind that door. Now, we've got a fantastic city. We spend millions of dollars on botanical gardens and parks and looking after our patch, yet RMS don't seem to care or show any interest into the little bit of responsibility that they have to look after the gateways. Did you mention anything about that to them at that meeting?
Councillor Stutchbury.
Sadly, not the area of purview of this particular committee. I think we should pass this question on to Mr Ferris, don't you think?
Yeah, I've raised this issue with Mr Ferris. Mr Ferris, could you just update the councillors on the current status and the program for the freeway? Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, it's not really a local traffic committee issue as such, but we have continually discussed with RMS the maintenance regimes for the freeway, in particular the section through our city and our major entrances, as Councillor King has discussed. So we'll continue to, last information they provided is they were reviewing the service levels, and we could get some indication off them of what has been allowed, and then we can explore with them some other opportunities where we might be able to get more maintenance done on those particular intersections, those freeway interchanges.
Councillor King, further question?
Yes, probably to Mr Ferris and through Mr Mayor. Is there an opportunity for council to take over those gateways and do the work ourselves and be paid by RMS handsomely, I hope, for doing that?
Mr Ferris?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, that's certainly one option we can further explore with RMS.
Thank you. Comfortable? Thank you. Okay. Happy to put those minutes. All those in favour? Anyone against? They're carried. There are no documents for sealing. CM13 Officers' Reports for consideration. Review of Albury City Council Asset Management Policy. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to move that Council A receive and note the final draft asset management policy and strategy as presented. B, place the draft asset management policy and strategy on public exhibition for a period of 28 days. C, if no submissions are received, that the final draft asset management policy and strategy be adopted and placed on the public policy and procedure register. And D, the asset management policy and strategy be reviewed in 2021-22 or sooner if required by legislation and or council circumstances.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 13.2, the Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan, 2019 to 2023. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note submissions received in response to the public exhibition of the draft Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019 to 2023, and B, endorse the Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019-2023.
Thank you. Councillor Gluckin.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor, I have a question from a councillor. Did you wish to open debate first?
Did you have a question, did you say?
Yeah.
Happy to take the question.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just ask through you to the appropriate member of staff, what, if any, options have been identified for the Wonga wetlands?
Ms Squire.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thanks for the question. We already have a master plan developed for Wonga wetlands. We have, as part of the Regional Growth Environment Tourism Program, identified the creation of a visitor education and experience centre at Wonga, as well as extending the Wagira Trail around Wonga. So certainly this plan highlights the need to continue with that work, but essentially it would be implementing the plan that already exists.
Thank you, Ms Squire. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to open debate on that?
I'd just like to say a few words. A, to commend the staff on the quality of the report. It really has highlighted a whole range of issues which are beneficial to Albury and set out a fairly good direction for what might happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think it's an exciting time for Destination Albury-Wodonga.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. There being no further speakers or questions, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.3, the Albury Airport Users Advisory Committee membership. Councillor Gluckin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you as the Chair, to move this recommendation as a motion with one slight change. That Council A amends the Albury City Airport Users Advisory Committee terms of reference to include 6 to 7 members from airport-related businesses. B, accepts the nominations for membership to the Albury City Airport Users Advisory Committee for the remaining two-year period 2018 to 2020, being Mr Steve Drage, Mr Stephen Death and Mr Graham Wheeler. C, further consider the Albury Airport governance structure during 2019. And if I get a seconder for that, I will then like to ask the staff a question. Thank you.
Okay, so we just have 6 to 7 included after include. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to ask that question? I'll get a seconder first for you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to ask the question?
Yes, prior to opening debate, I'd just like to check with the relevant members of staff if there is an issue with there being 6 to 7 members, or do we need to have a definitive number?
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The current terms of reference allows for 6, and what the recommendation was asking for now is 7, so we can include the 3 nominees. So depending on the intent of Councillor Glacken's amendment, is it reading that we're going from 6 to 7, or it will, in the future, will include 6 or 7?
Yes, Mr Zachnich.
Perhaps to simplify that and cover all bases, we might further amend that up to make it up to 7 members.
Up to, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll explain my reasoning in my opening of
So
debate.
we'll get that changed to up to 7 members, and then you can open debate.
Thank you. And subsequent to my opening of debate, if the staff believe that we need to be more definitive in that recommendation, then I'm happy to consider that further. Mr Mayor, the reason I'm suggesting that we have up to 7 members is that on this occasion we have 3 very good nominations, and that will take our number to 7. And part of the report explains that on occasion we don't have all members there, which is a very common occurrence on the basis that all of these people are working in aviation industry and often away on business. So to ensure that we have good representation from the people who are out there utilising the facilities and services of our airport, it's important to be able to include a number of other people. There may be, at some time in the future, when we again seek expressions of interest for people to nominate, we may find that we don't have sufficient to fill all of those 7 positions, and so therefore my suggestion is that we accept up to 7, but not a definitive number of absolutely 7, so that they would necessitate us to go out immediately again to try and fill those positions. The Airport Advisory Committee is a very proactive committee, and it has good participation from the users. It's an important committee to ensure that the airport remains, the airport has been and will remain in the future, a business and a venture that supports our city and our community, very much the wider regional community. So therefore I'm very happy to support this recommendation here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question from Councillor Con on Speaker 4. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the relevant member of staff, please. My question relates to Part C of this motion, noting that we have an airport that's been award-winning and continues to deliver a fantastic benefit to our community. I note that one of the options to consider for future governance was a skill-based board, and my question is, would that board still report to the council, or does that option mean that the airport would become an independent entity?
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that was a recommendation from the organisational review, and we haven't explored that as yet, how that structure may look and if it would be beneficial to the operations of the business out there, and we intend to do that during 2019. The next term of this committee will conclude in 2020, and therefore if there is some identified improvements, then we could council could decide to change it, and that structure could be a whole range of different arrangements.
Do you have a follow-up?
Sounds like we'll be having that discussion next year.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, you wish to speak for?
Yes, I'd like to speak for Councillor Glacken's motion, and I feel compelled to point out, and with the utmost respect for Councillor Glacken, it's not a dig, but my old classmate from Aquinas Christian Brothers College, Stephen Death, pronounces his last name Death. No worries, it's not a criticism, I just thought we should correct that. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. Okay, there'd be no further speakers for or against. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to close debate?
No, thank you.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have the CM 13.4, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning refurbishment, Albury Entertainment Centre. Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move that Council A accepts the tender provided by Red Air Conditioning for contract number 18/02189 for the construction of heating, ventilation and air conditioning refurbishments to the Albury Entertainment Centre Theatre Wing for the lump sum of $880,550, including GST. B, endorses the reallocation of $150,000 of funding from the Albury Entertainment Centre Theatre Profile Lights project to replacement of theatre HVAC at the centre.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, did you wish to ask a question before you open debate?
I would like to, Mr Mayor, if that's possible.
Yep.
I'm just interested, earlier in the evening we went through the issues and one of them, and I'm just flicking back through my electronic copy, which is my fingers moving as fast as I possibly can. But there was an item under the actions in progress, refurbishment of the heating system at Lauren Jackson Sports Centre, contract number 18/1246. We're waiting for some investigations of the feasibility of the future installation of high efficiency solar thermal desiccant air conditioning system similar to that at the Stockton Shopping Centre in Wendouree, Victoria, in suitable council-owned buildings. And I want to just ask the question from the most relevant member of staff whether this particular air conditioning system was even in the mix as far as providing an option for the entertainment centre air conditioning upgrade.
Mr Ferris. Mr Keys.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. This form of, or this system is still under extreme levels of testing. It's still being worked through, and for that reason we're waiting on further advice from the CSIRO, who are part of the project group on this. It wasn't considered as part of the mix for the AEC.
Can I just have a follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Is there an opportunity for us, and understanding that CSIRO, I think they're based in Melbourne and Richmond, is that correct? Is there an opportunity for us to offer a council building for them to use as a test site?
If it was cooling, they could use this one right now. Mr Zachnich.
Yes, that's certainly an opportunity for us, and part of our energy savings action plan is to explore such approaches in addition to the council resolution relating to the Lauren Jackson Sports Centre.
Did you wish to open debate?
I do. It's obviously it's interesting to note that the project successful tender, if this motion gets up, is obviously slightly higher in price than what the council officer's budget was for this particular project. But obviously part of the motion seeks to address that particular issue. So understanding that the building is 50 years old and probably the current system is 30 years old, it was well in need of an upgrade, and I think that future generations of theatre goers will be very grateful for tonight's motion. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. Being no further speakers for or against, Councillor Van wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM 13.5, reconstruction of taxiways at Albury Airport. Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you as the Chair, to move the recommendation as a motion that Council A accepts a tender from Anton Civil Engineering. Perhaps Councillor Cameron will correct me later. Civil Engineering Australia Proprietary Limited for contract number 18/026885, reconstruction of taxiway Alpha and Echo and taxiway Charlie, excluding separable portion, in the lump sum of $3,024,995.41, including GST, and B, not accept any tender for the extension of taxiway Alpha separable portion based on budgetary constraints.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to open debate? I have 2 questions pending.
Very happy to take those questions first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to the relevant member of staff. Just looking, I know it's a bit hard to argue an $800,000 price difference for a company that's based in Sydney. But in the report by the council staff, they indicated the majority, approximately 90% of material, plant and labour would be sourced locally. How does council monitor this?
Mr Ferris.
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So as part of their submission, they needed to nominate their key subcontractors and then also provide the estimate of how much would be sourced locally. So we'll ensure that they meet what they've promised as far as the use of local contractors, but they've certainly got a long list of local subcontractors that they will use on this project.
That they will use. So again, I didn't quite think that my question about the monitoring of it was answered. Saying, well, every month we need to check off that that's in fact the case.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So we'll appoint a contract superintendent who will ensure that what was part of their submission is delivered, and that will include the use of subcontractors. So we will monitor it on a daily basis on what staff they have on site compared to what they've got on their submission.
It's a follow-up. There's a big push federally and hopefully state and for the payments of these larger companies to smaller subcontractors. Can you just enlighten us what procedures the council has in place to ensure that regular payments are made to these small contractors, and what documentation the major contractor has to provide to us?
Mr Ferris.
Mr Mayor, so with every progress claim made, it needs to be accompanied by a stat deck detailing that all their subcontractors have been paid for the works completed to date.
Yes, thank you, Mr Ferris. Further, through you, Mr Mayor, are any of those subcontractors contacted to double check that they have been paid?
Mr Ferris.
Mr Mayor, so from time to time we have subcontractors make contact with us with regard to payment. We confirm that with the contractor that their stat deck is correct. It is a legal document, so if they're providing misleading information, then that would be illegal, and there's avenues then to pursue that between the subcontractor and the head contractor. But all we can do from a principal point of view is to ensure that they've completed the stat deck, and if we are requested, we'll confirm that directly with them and try and resolve any issues that are outstanding.
Just one more, if I may. So the company's indicated they'll contribute to a local sporting group should they be successful. A lot of these tenders nominate sporting groups. Is that in the tender that it's a sporting group, or can it be something like the men's and ladies shed or some other community group? It's not solely sport.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly just have it as community group. So it's certainly up to the contractors to provide details of which community groups they support. That may be men's shed, may be a sporting group of their choice.
Thank you. Not one.
So any disadvantaged group that could go in there?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly also asked that question. So as per Council's local benefit process that we introduced some time ago, there's a number of standard questions around supporting local groups, employment opportunities, advanced technology, a whole range of things that as a council we resolved when we allocated the 10% to the qualitative assessment.
Swimming association here, you might want to pass their number on to them.
Councillor Vanderven, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. One is a follow-up to Councillor King's question. In the event that people or companies don't meet the commitments that they make as when they tender for jobs and get jobs, is that then reflected in future assessments by our council officers?
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly the performance of the contractor in past contracts with AlburyCity is considered in all our assessment processes. So the answer to Councillor Vandervan is yes.
Okay, so my separate questions. We're trying to, in this motion, we're trying to exclude the separable portion based on budgetary constraints. What are those budgetary constraints? And second question is, did we go through the process of working out the contracted job? I'm interested in the fact that there's a quote here for the separable portion of $1,166,403 and a few cents, which was the cheapest one. It's just by the same person that's proposed to do the major work. So I'm interested in the fact that when this actually now goes to tender as its own job, will we see a price come in at that price, or will it be more expensive because they've got to, bring gear here, etc., to do the job? So I'm just wondering whether the separable portion was quoted as being done at the same time as the major job, or as a separate job on its own.
Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so it was a separable portion in the contract. So the contract needed to price it as though it could have been done separately as such, albeit given that they're there on site, there'd be some economies of scale. Given the quantity of $1 million, the establishment cost would be very low as a percentage of the total cost. So I don't believe that there'll be a marked increase for establishment if we do it at a later stage.
Okay, so that's the answer to the second question. Now, can we get the answer to the first question?
Mr. Mayor, if Councillor Vanderven could please repeat.
What are the budgetary constraints?
So the budgetary constraints are based on, we've got around about $3.2 million for this project. If we combine the two projects, we're over $4 million, which would mean that we would be outside budget provisions that we have for 18-19. We included the separable portion just to see what the market response to the contract was and if it could be fitted within the original budget. The exercise has proved that it can't be. The extension of taxiway alpha is a mid-term objective, so it's around a 3 to 5 year or even a little bit longer depending on demand. So we don't see any rationale to bring that works forward at this stage.
Just to follow up on that.
Yes.
The separable portion of the work, which is a separate quote, what time frame would that now take as its own project? How long would that take? But what I'm basically seeing is we've got an 18-week window that they're providing as far as the construction is concerned. I'm not sure what the council staff have allowed for this particular work, but I think that the 18 weeks was, I'd say the contract they estimated 20 weeks. So what we're going to have now is a situation where, whilst there are budgetary constraints, we're going to have a situation where we're going to have inconvenience, if you like, to airport users for 18 weeks and then maybe another further however many weeks that separable portion is.
Mr. Ferris.
Mr. Mayor, just based on pure dollars, 18 weeks, $3 million, for another $1 million would be another 6 weeks work.
Okay, so yeah, I'm still not convinced that we can't do this particular job, getting it out of the way, even though it's only something that's 3 or 5 years down the track as a must. I think we need to be a bit more proactive, but anyway, I'll have that conversation. Thanks.
Mr. Zachnich, did you have comments?
Sorry, just a question that might clarify it. The works themselves aren't, as I understand it, the works themselves aren't a continuation of the primary work, so there there'd be an impact in any event. Is the point I'm making from a timing point of view and an impact point of view, which is the issue you've raised.
Councillor King, question?
Question through you, Mr. Mayor. Just in relation to Councillor Vanderven's a very pertinent point, is that I think we authorised the General Manager to negotiate with the builder of the airport for the upgrades of the kiosk, and I think we also appointed the General Manager to discuss the lowering of the cost of the wash bay at the waste management facility. What's the appetite, or is it something that we could ask the General Manager to go back to the winning tenderer and discuss the potential of that Section 2 being incorporated as one job lot?
Mr. Zachnich.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's certainly an option, and we could report back to you on the outcome. So what would be required there, if there was a need to amend that, is not to accept any tender for the extension of the taxiway Alpha separable portion, and negotiate with Anton Civil Engineering with a view to entering into a contract for completion of those works. Words to that effect, to give effect to what Councillor King is suggesting. Sorry.
Yep.
And in addition, Council would then need to, at the conclusion of those negotiations, endorse a further report and, if accepted, an additional budget allocation as outlined by Mr. Ferris.
Councillor King.
Yeah, I just haven't got my notes here, but so the time frame for this to be commenced is, so we'll put it as stage 1, is what time frame?
18 weeks.
It's in 18 months. Yeah. So we've got a fair bit of time.
No, not commenced. That's completion. Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll be looking to award the contract before Christmas, after tonight's meeting, and then have the contractor on site early to mid-January when most of those civil suppliers are back at work, and so then it would continue on through the next 4 months to complete the first part of the contract.
Councillor Vanderman?
Yeah, that was my my concern and around this, that we have a window of opportunity for this particular work to be done, and adding 6 weeks might close that window. Yeah, I'm not sure whether we have enough time to make any alterations to this. I'm just wondering whether we just cannot make an item C amendment to this to say authorise the General Manager to have negotiations with Anton Civil Engineering with a view to including the separable portion yeah. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, the situation here is that I believe that this council needs to be proactive with these civil works, and it's not just these things at the airport. And I understand.
Is it a question or a debate, Mr. Mayor?
Sorry, I will, if I'm permitted, Mr. Mayor, I will get to the question.
Yep.
The impact on the budget is my question. What impact will it be on our budget and on our ability to continue with our capital works program if this was included in the project?
Mr. Sacknich, Mr. Ferris. He's getting a lot of questions, not Mr. Ferris.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as outlined in the report, the separable portion from Anton Civil Engineering was $1.2 million or thereabouts. So that would be the budgetary impact, where in a future quarterly review we would need to adjust our budgets to allow the inclusion of the separable portion in this year's budget.
Did you have a follow-up?
No.
Councillor Con, question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question follows on from that one. The current tender from Anton Civil Engineering for the separable portion was deemed to be not recommended because of the budgetary constraints at the cost that they've put in. Do the staff have an estimate of what cost, if negotiated, would not be unacceptable based on those budgetary constraints?
Mr. Ferris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the costs tendered by the company is their cost to undertake the project as it is. There's limited opportunity to change the scope of the project, so any negotiations, my belief would be that their price will remain as printed here.
Thank you. Councillor Dox, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Mr. Ferris. My concern has come from the conversations we've been having, is that if we make any adjustment tonight, we're going to be moving into unfavourable weather conditions to complete this project if we stall it tonight. I, as a seconder of the motion, am not in favour of any adjustments outside of this, and I'll be more than happy to accept in 2 or 3 years' time a new proposal to come forward to us. We need to move on this motion tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to open debate on this item, given that everyone seems to be debating?
I'd be delighted to, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I speak for the recommendation put forward by staff. However, I have heard the concerns of the councillors around the table, including the attempt to start debating prior to the opening debate. And acknowledging those concerns of the councillors, I do remind councillors that this report tells us quite clearly that staff looked at combining a number of works and bringing together a number of works from a number of years as were planned forward originally. So we're talking about works that were planned to be done in the next year, as well as in future years, 2 or 3 years down track. The staff brought these works together for this tender process with a view to attempting to reach economies of scale. Regretfully, it wasn't possible to be able to do so. So we're not doing works as was planned. We are simply ensuring that the works that were planned for this next year would be undertaken if we agree with this recommendation tonight. The works that were to come in subsequent years, so not in our current or next year of capital works, would be undertaken in due course. They're not critical, they are important, but they are not critical. So by supporting this recommendation tonight, this motion tonight, we would not be disadvantaging ourselves and we would not be disadvantaging the airport and the users of the airport. The most important part is the works that we would be, that the motion suggests that we would accept tonight. And those works enable the airport to be more efficient and effective, to be able to get the planes off the main runway more quickly and in a more safe way. That's the important work that we need to ensure is approved tonight to be able to be undertaken as was originally planned. The report indicates that the tender that was sent out, that was enabled by our staff with the attempt of combining a number of works, was simply an attempt in the hope that we could gain some economies of scale and in the hope that we might be able to achieve more than the works that was necessarily going to be undertaken in this current year's program. So to not support this staff recommendation means that we may disadvantage ourselves, and it doesn't acknowledge that the works were not originally planned for in this period in any case. So I request that councillors consider strongly the recommendation as a motion that we have in front of us tonight to undertake the works that we need to undertake in this year, and then to continue to put off the works that we didn't need to do in this year that were originally planned for 2 or 3 years down track. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. A speaker against, Councillor Vanderman.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll move an amendment, please, that we remove item B from the motion and the brackets excluding separate proportion and then include that separate proportion in the total amount of the job. And looking for a seconder for that amendment.
A seconder, Councillor King.
Happy to second that.
Okay. I'll just wait for the amendment to be included, Councillor Vanderman.
what's that?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
no,
Zack.
that's-
Did you comfortable with that, Councillor Vanderbilt?
That's exactly what...
Did you wish to open debate on the amendment? Thanks.
That'd be great, thanks, Mr Mayor.
I've got a second, Councillor King.
So, with all of the questions that have been asked around this particular project, and noting that Councillor Glacken has indicated that the staff has said that we have budgetary constraints, I do note that the budget is the primary concern of councillors. Now, I also note in the report, and mind you, it was a very good report, these proposed upgrades seek to improve regular public transport, RPT and general aviation efficiencies by reducing takeoff and landing delays through the improvement and addition of possible runway entry and exit points. In addition, these civil works will provide one-way access for the future multi-use Western Precinct development as identified within the master plan. So what we have here is a situation where what we're going to be doing is we're going to be proactive in doing works now that in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, will have been it will have been too late to do. And one of the total frustrations of looking at infrastructure spending by governments around this country is that it's always too late. And I think we have an opportunity here for a very minor impact on our budget to do some works which has been flagged as being required in the next 2 to 10 years, and do it now, and that will make the airport and its the use of the airport much more attractive to potential new corporations coming in and flying in and out of Albury Airport. So from those perspectives, I think we should bite the bullet and get both of these projects done at the same time. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Vanderven, we have questions from Councillor Glacken and Councillor King. You comfortable with taking them, Councillor Con, speaking against? Yep. Councillor King, question?
Yes, through to the relevant member of staff, probably Mr Zachnich. Again, I raised the point of actually asking the contractor about his price, and I'm not totally over the machinations of this, but if we approve this motion, and we've got to understand we've got a council meeting next week. That's right. Is the opportunity in this week to actually have a conversation with the Antoon Civil Engineering in regards to that original point that I raised, that that if this was combined, would they be able to sharpen their pencil, so to speak?
Mr Zachnich.
Yes, so thanks for the question. So if council endorses this amendment and becomes the motion, that there won't be that opportunity. You'll be accepting the tender as is, but as detailed in the report through you, Mr Mayor, the separable portion in the order of 1.1767 million is a discounted rate based on the works being conducted together. So the contractor has already taken that into account in terms of their tender submission as a separable portion at the same, undertaking that work at the same time as the primary component of this project.
Questions, thank you.
Councillor Glacken, question?
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. Councillor Vanderven has asserted that the works would be too late if they're not done this year, if we leave them until they were originally programmed to be done.
Mr Mayor, I did not assert any such thing.
Your point was, Councillor Vanderven?
The fact is that the works are being flagged as having to be done in the next 2 to 10 years. So I'm being proactive and getting work done now, and then we'll have an airport that people will want to come to, and not, have issues where we have to do this work because we haven't done it before.
Okay, happy to accept that. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to continue with your question?
Yes, my understanding is that Councillor Vanderven said that governments are always too late with their work, and I can't remember the exact wording. However, I'll leave it there. My question to the staff is, If the works, these subsequent works, which are the separable portion of the tender that was combined to undertake a number of works in one go, if that works were originally scheduled to be undertaken in another scheduled works program year, in 2 or 3 years down track, why would we consider to do it now other than to combine works and hope to achieve some economies of scale? Has anything else changed? Has the situation changed that necessitates us to bring that works forward? Thank you.
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, as outlined in the report, it was a medium-term objective. We were just looking for economies of scale to bring that works forward. There's no operational demand at this stage to extend taxiway Alpha, but as identified, it certainly will be in the medium term.
Thank you, Mr Ferris. Question from Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you. And I thought I went around this before, but we didn't get an answer. And so did we actually get a price from all of these contractors on the separable portion being a standalone contract done at a different time to this particular first contract?
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, as outlined in the report, it was to be done at the same time. Therefore, we were trying to have savings through economies of scale. By making it a separable portion, prohibits the contractor from changing the price for the initial component of that. So by not accepting the second part, they then have no option to change the $3.025 million component.
Okay, so there's follow-up.
Yeah.
So does the council staff, or do the council staff, through you, Mr Mayor, have an estimate of what the separable portion might cost as a standalone project?
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, as outlined earlier, given that it is not dependent on the other works and the size of it, I do not believe that the establishment costs will be significant for the project. I'd have to take on notice, and it would be hard to estimate what they have allowed for setup costs, but typically $1.17 million projects, the establishment costs aren't of a significant percentage of those. So if it was done in future years, there'd be CPI increases based on your construction costs and then some setup costs that would be on top of that as well.
Thank you.
Mr Ferris, just in relation to that separable portion, being it's framed for 2 to 10 years, is there any distinct advantage to this council to do that work apart from interruption from a economic or airport benefit?
Through you, Mr Mayor, our long-term plan is to have a parallel taxiway the whole length of our runway, and we've outlined that in our draft strategy. It is really depending on demand out of our community and the number of planes and carriers we have operating. So with the 3 carriers and the schedule we currently have, there's no immediate demand. But if we had a new carrier and an increased demand from our community, then the demand for the parallel taxiway the whole way will increase. So that's why it's in that 2 to 10 year, because you know, it may be required in 3 years, but it may not be required for 10 years.
Thank you. Speaker against, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My opposition to the amendment is pretty straightforward. Only seeing it for the first time tonight, not knowing what the impact of the extra $1 million spend will have on other programs and services of council in this financial year. I can't support it.
Thank you. Speaker for, Councillor King.
Yeah, I'm supporting Councillor Vandervan's motion. I've looked at the separable portion tender price, and the second price is only $13,000 difference. So pretty much the money's pretty correct when you've got 2 of your your tenderers so close. When these if it's been identified that this is a project that is 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, if the council staff thought it was relevant, they thought it was appropriate, they put it in there to see what would come out of it. And they put it in there. We've got this. We've got the price pretty close in the first two. And in regards to disruption, there is time disruption, a little bit more, but the end result is that we don't have to have contractors resubmitting prices to the successful tenderer 2 or 3 years down the track. There's continuity with our local small suppliers to know that they've got extra work in this project. And I just think the setup costs, the inductions, the project managers, the people who do all the work, it's in, it's out. Like $1 million is a lot of money. Sorry, $1.17 million is a lot of money, but what would that be in the 2 or 3, or 4 year track? Would it be $4 million? I don't know, but I'm supporting this motion.
Thank you. I have a speaker against, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can't accept throwing another $1.2 million at a project that is not necessary today or tomorrow or the next 12 months. I think it'll just put an impact on our budget, and I don't think we should be fiddling around with the budget as it is right now. And I can't support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. No speakers for. I have a speaker against, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I basically support Councillor Con's position that by taking this $1 million or $1.17 million, and it does distort our budget, it does distort what we are doing. Yes, the staff thought it was relevant, they thought it was appropriate, but in the end they decided that it needn't be done now. And the economies of scale are probably quite small. Mr Ferris has noted that the setup and establishment costs are a small percentage of the total contract cost, and I don't believe that we should be pushing our budget around to include this amount of money right now. It's not necessary for the airport. The airport is functioning well. We've not heard any complaints or problems with the airport. And yes, the long-term requirement is to have a full-length taxiway, one end of the runway to the other. But that has not inhibited air traffic at this airport, and it's unlikely to in the immediate future, so this project can wait and should wait.
Thank you. No speakers for. Speaker against, Councillor Glacken.
Very briefly, and thank you for allowing me to speak against. The staff put these tender opportunities together, or these capital works programs together, because it was an opportunist advantage if there could be a financial advantage. However, there is not. It's not imperative. At some stage we will need to do it, but there are many things around our community that need to be done. We can't simply say that we will undertake all works, all projects to their absolute completion next year. There's lots of work that we need to do around the city. Other areas, the Albury Entertainment Centre, the Lauren Jackson Sports Centre, the Lavington Sports Ground, the swimming pools. There are lots of areas. Did I pronounce that incorrectly? There are lots of areas around our community that would benefit from further works being undertaken. We cannot undertake all of those works in this in this current, let alone works period, or in the next 2 or 3 works period. We need to schedule the works. The works were originally scheduled for a later period. It was opportunist of the staff to bring this forward, to put the tender out for the greater scope of works. Regretfully, we have not achieved the economies of scale we hope to achieve. I can only go back to the original recommendation and motion that I moved and supported here this evening, and will continue to support, because we cannot achieve everything we would like to achieve in this next year. It is regretful, but that is our reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. There being no further speakers for or against, Councillor Vanderman, would you wish to close debate on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to have a discussion about a couple of points that various councillors have raised. The actual amount that we have to find for including the two contracts is 932,000 because we were 235 or 233,000 under what the budget allocation was. We don't know whether there's any economies of scale to be had here. There's no mention of the fact that it hasn't provided economies of scale. All there is the fact that the staff believe that there are from a budgetary perspective that the project shouldn't happen. So there's no mention in the report about the fact that there are not any economies of scale. I'm suggesting that in 5 years' time, when we go and do this project, it'll be a $1.5 million project plus. So if you add that in, we're basically only throwing away $340,000. So from my perspective, I think that this is the right way to go. I think it can be accommodated within the budget, and I look forward to support from councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. On that, I'm happy to put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? The amendment is lost. The original motion was moved by Councillor Glacken and seconded by Councillor Doxey. Councillor Glacken has opened debate on that motion. Are there any further speakers for or against that motion? Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. No one spoke against you on that one. Okay, thank you, councillors. CM 13.6, the Albury Leachate Treatment Plant Upgrade. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council accepts the tender from Water Treatment Australia Proprietary Limited for contract number 18/02396, leachate treatment facility design, construct and commission in the lump sum of $1.505946. Sorry, I'll start that one again. $1,505,946.22, including GST, and B, allocate a further $406,000, including GST, as part of the 2019-2020 operational plan to complete the project.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Wish to open debate.
Thurley might, but anyway.
Thurley, sorry.
Look, this is a technically very complex project, and I'm pleased to see that Council has spent a significant amount of time talking to relevant consultants about how this can be achieved. What it means is that we can treat the leachate from our facility so that it is useful and not a major problem. And we would be well up in the forefront of councils doing this sort of work. It's pretty innovative, pretty novel, and I think it's been well explored, and the reports that have come in from Kellogg, Brown, Root and so on to specify the tender and the details are particularly important, and I think that in choosing Water Treatment Australia, we've got a company with an extremely strong track record working in this field.
Thank you. I have a speaker against, but I'm happy to take a question from Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, this is a seemingly complex issue, and my question comes to really the role of the consultant in this tender, because essentially the staff recommendation and what Councillor Thurley has moved is that it has been moved that we accept the more expensive tender that's going to take a longer amount of time to construct over a cheaper tender, shorter period of construction from a local company. And my question is it usual to make such decisions on the basis of consultant reports rather than the usual staff assessment of
Mr.
tenders.
Ferris.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, the issue at hand here is the specialist nature of the works. So we needed to rely on some external specialists, and KBR have been very supportive in the process to date, and give that independent review of both the tenderers.
Comfortable with that, Councillor Stutzman? Yep. Speaker against, Councillor Vandervan.
I don't necessarily speak against this particular project, but I do find it interesting that in the previous two tenderers, the tenders that have been accepted by council, that we've allocated an extra $150,000 for the aircon and an extra $406,000 for the water treatment facility, but we couldn't see money available to do a project that we'll have to do in 5 or 6 or 7 years' time anyway. So I just find that particularly interesting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This project is important for our city, but it's also a recently changed requirement. We've always, and I'd like to highlight that, we have for a number of years worked diligently to ensure that we do process the product that comes from our facility. This is a result of a change of legislation and therefore a change in our requirement and the way in which we treat our leachate. So we have been treating our leachate. This is a change to the way in which it is to be treated. This has necessitated this work. It's something that is a requirement of us, unlike the airport additional taxiway area. So therefore, I'm very happy to support this tonight, and I note that Councillor Thurley has explained how important and very involved this process is, as indeed has another councillor this evening as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley, there's no speakers for or against. Did you wish to close debate?
No, I'd just like to comment that the use of Kellogg Brown root in this one was critical. Without their input, I would not have accepted a recommendation from our staff, and I think it's a recognition by Mr. Ferris and his staff of the technical complexity of this project, and they did the right thing by engaging qualified external consultants to provide the report.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM 13.7, Kerr Road Reconstruction Stage 5. Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council accepts the tender of Maxwell Gray Bruni Proprietary Limited for contract number 18/01922, Kerr Road Reconstruction Stage 5, in the lump sum amount of $1,247,891.15, including GST.
Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, you wish to open debate?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A fairly routine matter.
Thank you. No further questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.8, the Aquatics Advisory Committee options. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that Council A proceed with the establishment of a cross-border aquatics facility advisory committee, including .1, adopting the draft terms of reference for the Albury-Wodonga Aquatics Facility Advisory Committee, .2, seeking formal agreement from the City of Wodonga to be involved in the committee, and .3, pending approval from the City of Wodonga, commence the process to appoint all committee members, and B, formally thank the existing members of the Aquatics Facility Advisory Committee for their time and effort.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cameron. Councillor Stutchbury.
I would like to second that, including all of the dot points.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, did you wish to open debate? I have a question from Councillor Glacken.
I'm happy to take the question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I ask the mover and seconder if they could consider how we might be able to deal with the issue of the suggestion from the existing or the previously existing committee that we needed to deal with two areas. One was the overarching functionality of the aquatics facilities, but also the functional operational areas as well. And this motion doesn't cover the operational issues. So I'm wondering if the mover and seconder might consider how we might be able to include the aspect of the operational, because this deals with the overarching advisory committee. The committee highlighted the fact, and I was at the meeting when they did so, they highlighted the fact that the overarching committee cannot deal with the intricacies, the operational intricacies of the Albury pools and the Wodonga pools, that they should be dealt with individually. So can I ask if that could be included in this recommendation?
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Cameron.
I can't see how that would not directly negate the proposed motion with respect to Councillor Glacken. I mean, the proposed motion is to establish a cross-border committee and try and make it functional. The issue, if I understand the issue as put, is that Albury needs its own committee to deal with the intricacies of the Albury facilities.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
The short answer is I'm happy with the motion that's proposed that I've moved.
Thank you. And I believe Mr Zackness, did you wish to speak to that?
Just point of clarification through Mr Mayor, that what Councillor Glacken's referring to is, I think, adequately covered in the terms of reference that separates or focuses the proposed committee on strategic matters and refers to operational matters as a separate matter for discussion between user groups and centre management, essentially the contractor itself, which is the point you're referring to, as I understand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, do you wish to open debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The Two Cities, One Community initiative is a great initiative. I support it. I think we all support it. I've not heard any, I don't recall any councillors speaking at any point against it. But it has revealed, at least the aquatics contract, which has been the first large piece of fruit of that process that's been born, has revealed some cultural differences between the way that AlburyCity and Wodonga City traditionally operate. One of the principal differences is that we have a well-established system of community consultative committees regarding our activities and the use of our community facilities, and Wodonga don't seem to embrace that system. They, in turn, traditionally seem to establish task-based committees or committees for particular purposes, and then move on, you know, back to council and operational staff running things. I'm not being overly critical. You know, both models are viable, potentially, but I think when you adopt a changed system, such as we have with the aquatics facilities contract, it is very important to have engagement of the community. It's very important to be open in your dealings with the community, and I sincerely hope that Wodonga will participate in this proposed committee, because not to do so could potentially create a stumbling block in the Two Cities, One Community process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. There appear to be no further questions or debate. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM14 Officers' Reports for noting. 14.1 the Two Cities, One Community Action Plan Progress Report. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the December 2018 Two Cities, One Community Action Plan Progress Report.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Con, do you wish to speak to that?
Only briefly, Mr Mayor, to note that there's a number of strategies and projects as part of that progress report that have been progressing behind the scenes, and I know that those projects haven't had tangible outcomes for the community yet, but it's great to see that that work's ongoing.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Question whether Wodonga or Albury should be in the right order on the sign. That's about it, I think. But there's no further discussion or debate. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. We have no delegates' reports for noting. I've not been made aware of any urgent business. Councillor Thurley, did you wish to move us into confidential?
Thank you. I do, Mr Mayor. I move that Council move into confidential to discuss item CM 17.1, as this is a confidential item exclusive for press or public on the grounds that the matters relate to... We've got a 2, not a 1 or something there. I'm not exactly sure what
No, just the matters.
It relates to information, advice concerning litigation or advice would otherwise be privileged from production in legal proceedings on the grounds of legal professional privilege.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Second that.
Thank you. I need to ask if there's anyone in the chamber that wishes to have any public submissions in relation to reasons as identified in the confidential item 17.1. There are no submissions, so I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried that we move into confidential. Councillor Cameron.
I'll move that we move back into open council.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Put the motion. All those in favour? All against? The motion is carried. Thank you. Oh no. Yeah, there's a lot of contradiction going on. Thank you, councillors. We're back in open council. I'd just like to advise the council in open council of the resolution that's just recently been adopted in relation to the Lavington Sports Ground unsuitable soil update. It was moved by Councillor Cameron and seconded by Councillor Stutchbury. The councils take no further action on this matter. The motion was put and carried. Thank you, councillors. Council is now closed at 8:16. Thank you.